Finally, question number 3. This is from D. Lavoy. That's at David __ Lavoy. Thoughts on the Panthers? I think it's interesting that they are 0-3 on the road and 3-0 at home. How does the rest of the league view Bryce Young after 2 years? Well, I think you have to give the Panthers credit for their resilience. And I think this is a huge piece of what Dan Morgan, Brant Tillis, and of course Dave Canales have been looking to build in Carolina. So much of it for Dave has been about modeling a certain type of player and then trying to fill every position you can with that type of player. Edgy, tough, and I know these things can be cliches, but resilient. And you see it with some of the guys that they drafted. Like certainly I think Nick Scorton is somebody who fits that mold and what they've been looking for. Rico Dowdle was somebody they were talking about over the summer, somebody who could fill that sort of role. We see now, what he's capable of doing. Even Teteroa McMillan, who's sort of like a low burn personality, they felt like he had some of that. So I think what you're seeing with Carolina from a global standpoint is like some of those guys they already had that were that type of player, like a J.C. Horn or a Derek Brown or an Ike Ekwonu, mixed now with some of these new guys they brought in. And really, I think you've got a tough, resilient group. I don't think they're there yet, but you got a tough, resilient group that clearly can ride some things out. Now, as for Bryce Young, like this is an interesting one because they're going to have a big decision to make on him after the year. This is his 3rd year. So that means after this year, he's eligible for a new contract. They're also in a position to give him his fifth year option, make a decision on his 5th year option. That 5th year option is probably going to be around $30 million. It would lock the Panthers in for 2027. So that money's fully guaranteed. So essentially, when you exercise that 5th year option on a player, particularly a quarterback, you're saying that guy is going to be here for another 2 years. Are the Panthers willing to do that? Are the Panthers willing to entertain an extension? Because this is the point where you've seen some of these guys, you've seen teams turn the page on young quarterbacks. It was the Browns turning the Browns, that's really where the page began to be turned with Baker Mayfield, right? Like that was right, like in that decision where you're making the decision on the 5th year option, where you look at it with Baker Mayfield, and it's like, okay, like are we going forward with Baker Mayfield as our quarterback? Are we not? They went into 2021 with Baker. Baker gets hurt. And then they wind up trading Baker after his 4th year as he's going into his 5th year option. They trade him to the Panthers the year before that. The Jets made a similar decision on Sam Darnold. And like in those cases, I don't think it's that those teams didn't like those players. It just had gotten to a decision point. And it, so often with homegrown quarterbacks, it's either we pay them $55, $60 million per year or we move on. And so like that's sort of what's interesting about the situation the Panthers are going to be in with Bryce. Do you use that as your point to move on? Do you try to delay the decision for another year like the Browns did with Baker? And obviously the Browns wound up being wrong about that, but they did delay that decision for an extra year with Baker after making the playoffs with him in 2020. It's just an interesting spot that the Panthers are going to be in. And obviously over the back half of this year, they're going to collect more and more information on which way they go. And will they be in position to draft one next year? That's another part of the equation here. So it's a pretty interesting spot to be in. The Panthers, obviously the arrow is pointing up on them right now. It does look like a lot of the moves that they made in the offseason are starting to pay off. I'm excited to see what they can do with it because, again, they were really in on the personality of the team. They were really in on the culture of the team in the summer and really felt like what Dave Canales was looking to instill in year 1, like they were really starting to get it right before year 2. And I think that's shown up early on and how they've responded after they've gotten beaten up, like to get beat up the way that they did in New England and bounce back with from that with 2 straight wins, I think says a lot about where they're at. To beat the Cowboys the way they did, to come back against the Dolphins after falling behind in that game. You really started to feel some positive momentum here for the Panthers. And again, we'll see what that means for Bryce Young long term.